I'm going to go in depth on Shaye Groves' childhood. And I want to remind you, as we see all the time in Sinister, her childhood was awful. In fact, this one's really up there, and we don't even have all of the details. But of what I know, horrific. But the adult that Shaye turned into is an actual real-life monster. So today, I'm going to do what I do on Sinister, and I'm going to tell you exactly how monsters like this are made, because everything that happened in Shaye Groves' childhood really lines up with some of her traits later in life. You'll see all the patterns, but hey, welcome back if you missed me. I was gone for roughly a month or so. It was just kind of during the holidays, and then I had a lot going on, and then the fires happened in LA. I'm sure a lot of you guys heard. I had to evacuate for a couple of days, and then just getting everything back in order was really a lot. But I'm back home. I'm safe and sound. Everything is all good. And we are back to our live streams, back to work, back to giving you great Sinisters. But a little fun thing to know, because we missed several weeks and we have sponsors, you're going to get 2 Sinisters a week for a little bit here. All right. And don't forget, we post a lot of videos here on the main channel, but we also have a second channel, which is fully dedicated to body cam videos. Pretty much every week there's a new 1 or 2 videos out. There's probably 100 over there. So if you're looking for some new stuff to binge and you like the body cams, make sure you check that out. Also, I have another podcast on my third channel. It's more of like a pop culture and music podcast. Y'all know I just be gossiping. I just be talking, So you can check out I Got Nothing on the third channel if you're looking for something a little more lighthearted and you just want to hang out with me for like an hour while I ramble through whatever's going on in the media that day. But we're here and it's time for Sinister. Shaye Groves was born in 1996 in a place called Havant, England. The town had a population of about 125,000 people. I always like to give that little detail because, if somebody grew up in a town of 800 people, or if they grew up in somewhere like New York, it just radically changes the type of person they are. But Shaye grew up in a pretty normal sized city, about 125,000 people. Not much is known about her parents per se, but it was obvious Shaye had a really difficult childhood. One detail that I thought was particularly interesting was Shaye struggled with her hearing and she was partially deaf. Not only was Shaye struggling with being partially deaf and not always being able to hear her friends or family or peers, but she had to wear a hearing aid. So the minute that Shaye becomes of the age where we're really aware of what our peers think of us, I would say this is around 10, 11, 12, she starts the school year off with 2 hearing aids in the early 2000s. And my God, the kids were mean. Just to put this into perspective for you guys, if, these days in modern times, if a kid had a hearing aid or any type of thing that helped them with a disability or 2 hearing aids, we would probably be very nice to them. The culture has shifted significantly. But if you're about my age, like in your late 20s or your 30s, kids are mean. People said that Shaye was subjected to intense bullying at the school, and it wasn't just because of her hearing aids or her disability. They found other reasons to pick on Shaye. Now, Shaye had a not great home life. She was dealing with a disability, and the one thing that helped her with this disability, people were making fun of her for it. She was a little socially awkward. She was just trying to figure things out, and the children were not kind. Well, this all starts when she's 11, but shortly after that, Shaye gets dealt another blow. She became the victim of sexual abuse in her own home. Now, it's not clear if this was a parent or if this was a family friend or a family member or something, but this was happening repeatedly inside of Shaye's home. And there was seemingly nothing she could do. She got to the point where, as a 13-year-old child, she started carrying around a knife or a scalpel just to have some type of protection. One day, Shaye actually threatened somebody with the scalpel. And she's 13 years old. So this gets reported. There's a lot of other behaviors with Shaye, honestly, understandably so. And I just want to point this out really quick. Like I said, Shaye turned into an absolute fucking monster, and we'll get there. But part of the reason that I tried to be kind to the child that they were is because there's a lot of people that grew up like Shaye. Just because she did something honestly terrifying when she became an adult doesn't mean that I'm going to bully her when I'm talking about her childhood years, because a lot of people were very similar to Shaye when they were teenagers. However, they've chosen a different path. So please allow me to express a bit of empathy when I talk about what she went through, but trust me, we're on the same page when the tables turn. I know. We're all just browsing the internet and we're like, okay, we're having fun. This is a good time, while they're all collecting our information. Listen, I've been talking about this for the longest time. Every time you sign up for a website, every time you click a couple buttons anywhere, they're tracking everything you do. It's just the reality of the situation. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm actually just trying to keep you up to date. This is a sponsor, by the way. It's for Aura. I'm going to explain how their service can help this, but let me just continue to explain a little of the situation. When you fill out a form or you sign up on a website, and that website, let's say it's a startup or a new company, or maybe they just haven't invested a lot of money into their cybersecurity, your data is at risk. The passwords you put in, the addresses you put in, any information that you put in there, that information can be bought and sold. And it's happening all the time, every day. Your information has become a business. So what can you do about it? Try Aura. It is a data protection service that alerts you if anything is strange going on with your identity, if any of your information has been leaked on the web. It just keeps you protected at all times. Not to mention, they can also remove data that is already listed on different websites. I'm telling you right now, there is no reason not to have personal data protection for you, your partners, or your family. It's incredibly important this time. I mean, I guess if you care about people stealing your email address, full name, phone number, and selling it to other people for money, you can take action. And honestly, it's quite easy. You can sign up for a monthly or annual membership, and Aura does all of the work for you. All you have to do is check the notifications and stay up to date. You guys can get 2 weeks free of Aura by going to aura.com/sinister. Sign up to protect your data today. At least give it a try. That's aura.com/sinister. So she makes this very serious threat, and she's taken in for a mental health assessment. During this assessment, they decide that she has complex PTSD and bipolar. I 100% believe that Shaye had complex PTSD, but if you've watched a lot of Sinister, or some of you have seen every episode, it's very strange to me that very often teenagers get diagnosed with bipolar disorder and they're immediately medicated. I would have to say this is probably the third or fourth case where this has come up. It was pretty evident that Shaye was extremely traumatized. During her assessment, it was revealed that she was self-harming, and I mean severe self-harm. She was drinking heavily. She was experimenting with drugs, all at 13. And then when she was about 15 or 16 years old, I mean, everything just started escalating. The self-harm, the drinking, the drugs, meeting new people. She ends up trying to run away from home. And this is interesting to me because if you're anything like me, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, she was being abused in the home. She was trying to leave the home. Like maybe it was a family member or something like that. But this is what Shaye said. She said she left home because she started a relationship with someone in which there was some abuse, but to what extent was not clear. Take what you will from this. I think that that's very interesting because I'm like, wow, this is like an opportunity to really explain like what happened to you. And she keeps it to herself. That could be because she hasn't dealt with it and she's trying to minimize it, or maybe because it's been quite a while since. I'm not sure. But there's an interesting little trait about Shaye. So back to her being about 15 or 16. She's already doing a lot of self-medicating behaviors that are very dangerous, especially for a child. But then she starts to get into some more dark things like horror movies and horror movie villains and metal music and, tattoos and just looking really hardcore. She had pictures of all of these serial killers and whatnot all over her walls, just paraded everywhere. And you know what? Her favorites were Richard Ramirez and Rose West. Rose West was a serial killer who was torturing women. Shaye Groves was a fan of Rose West. She also really liked Chucky from Child's Play. She had a lot of memorabilia of him. Jigsaw from the Saw films. She also had a case on her phone that had a quote from the movie The Craft. It said, "We are the weirdos, mister." So fast forward, Shaye is just leading this life of self-medication, trying to forget her past, not talking about her past, and just diving deeper and deeper into these dark subjects and topics. In my personal experience, diving into metal and the goth scene and all this kind of stuff after experiencing extreme trauma, sometimes it comes from a place of like, well, I'm going to be bad now. I'm going to be bad and I'm going to be scary and I'm going to get my power from, being somebody that everyone should stay away from. I definitely played that card in my 20s because I don't know, that was the pathway from my childhood into my adulthood. But I very quickly learned that you cannot draw power from a coffee mug with Chucky on it. Okay. So this is what she was making her identity. I'm very scary. It's also kind of sometimes a way to mark to the public how damaged you are. It's almost like a cry for help sometimes in some ways. Nobody will process it this way, but like it kind of is saying to people, I'm damaged, stay away from me, even though you actually really want people close. So Shaye dives deeper into all of this. And speaking of her wanting people close, in 2017, she meets somebody that she really likes. This guy's name was Ashley Wingham. And Ashley seemed to be a pretty decent man, that's questionable because, Shaye is already going down this dark path. In the very least, he was not violent to Shaye, but we don't know that much more about them. Now, when Shaye was just 21 years old, she and Ashley had a child together. Something must have happened after she had the baby because she went in for another psychiatric evaluation. They sent her in again at 21 and they said, you know what? Yep, she's got complex PTSD and it's pretty serious. Whatever she was going through, it really waned on the relationship and the two of them then had a falling out. Now, I just want to mention, we are getting to the point where Shaye is no longer the child that she was that was hurt. And now she's an adult that is making choices and has to take responsibility for her choices. And one thing I would say here is that whatever happened to Shaye after she had this psychiatric assessment, like the reason that she had to go in, this is now the second time that she is being told by medical professionals, you have been significantly traumatized. You have post-traumatic stress disorder, and not just PTSD, you have complex PTSD. It means that multiple things happened to you that were unresolved, and now they're all tangled up and surging through your body at all times. You are constantly living in a state of anxiety, fear, panic, anger, confusion, so many different things. That is what this diagnosis means. I know some people might say, well, what if she didn't have insurance? What if she couldn't get help? This is the point where you need to start looking for any resource that you can because this is a very serious diagnosis and you cannot get through this on your own and it will not get better. It will only get worse, especially as other traumas come down and compound on you. I just want to really reiterate that. A diagnosis like this does not simply go away on its own and it doesn't get better. It gets worse. So I understand that not everyone will always have immediate access to the high level kind of treatments for this, like actually going to a therapist or getting psychiatric help or something. But it's really important to maybe look for a support group, even have somebody that you can talk to that's been through a similar thing. Like at this point, you have to take this diagnosis seriously. And that was not in the cards for her. Instead, Shaye actually decided to go deeper into her own darkness. So no matter what you think, that's the fork in the road. It's like Shaye had a choice between, oh my God, I have this really horrible thing that they've told me twice now that I have because these terrible things happened to me and they're willing to help me and work with me, or I'm just going to go be evil. And Shaye chose, I'm just going to go be evil. And look, I understand some of you might fight me on that, but I hold people to the standard of trying to get better for those around them because I did it. So let's Let's get up and do it. Let's be the best version of ourselves, for ourselves, and for the people around us. So anyways, back to Shaye. So after all of this, they completely break up and Shaye goes to live at a women's refuge. And she actually lives there for quite some time. Like, that was her home up until February 2022, when she's now 26 years old. So this is years after her relationship with Ashley, and she's got her baby. She ends up meeting another man named Frankie Fitzgerald. And Frankie is a 25-year-old guy that has 2 daughters of his own. So now these 2 people that really don't have it all together are going to date and raise 3 children together. Oh my God, it just stresses me out saying that. Around this age, Shaye starts to take on a little bit more of like a goth image. She did not really look like this when she was younger, but now she's got even more tattoos. She's wearing her makeup a different way, and she kind of seems really proud of this image. Like, it's almost like she kind of wants to look scary. It kind of lends back to that, stay away from me, I'm damaged, but I'm so bad. But, you know, the reality is Shaye actually is a pretty bad person. So earlier, Frankie gave us a huge red flag, and then Shaye was like, oh yeah, I'm about to blow your red flag out of the water. She tells Frankie while they're in the talking stage, I love serial killers. I love crime. I can't believe I'm saying this. She said this. She told him that she liked rape pornography and rough sex, weapons, all that kind of stuff. And you know what Frankie said? Oh, hell yeah, I'm in. She showed him her little collection that she kept by her bed. She had a flick knife that she kept in her boot, a Celtic dagger, and then also a ball-bearing gun, and then 2 axes that sat in her bedroom. These were her fun little lethal weapons that she liked to use during sex. And Frankie was all in. And not only that, but they were really into BDSM. I just want to point out, you know, people that are actually in like the BDSM community, they have a lot of rules, or like there's safety, or they know that this is BDSM and there's, you know, a lot of information around it. I can't even really call what Shaye and Frankie were doing BDSM, because they were just fucking crazy and on a whole bunch of coke, swinging weapons around with each other. Some of the articles like called their relationship BDSM. I can't even call it that. It was drug fueled. It was irresponsible. It was, you know, hedonistic. It was very intense, but it was not safe. It wasn't normal sex. This was something else. Today's video is sponsored by Lumi. Lumi is a whole body deodorant that takes care of you for up to 72 hours. It was actually created by an OBGYN that felt like a lot of body odor issues were just being misdiagnosed. So they created a pH balancing full body deodorant you can use from head to toe to take care of anything you need. They got a solid deodorant stick. They got the spray stick. They got the sweat stick. Any way that you like to apply your deodorant, they got it. And you know what? They've got multiple scents. Clean tangerine, lavender sage, or my favorite, toasted coconut. Normally I like fresh scents, but the toasted coconut, it just smells nice. I just like it. And also, reminder, I did say it is a full body deodorant, so it's safe to use below the waist. Listen, you can try a Lumi starter pack where they give you their best products, and then also you can mix and match some other things that you might want to try out. Now, my code will give you 15% off if you want to give it a try, but if you also get the starter pack, which honestly I recommend, it's just a good deal and it's customizable, you get an additional 15% off from the bundle. Everybody needs a little deodorant, and everybody loves a deal. So you can go over to lumedeodorant.com/sinister. That's LUMEDEODORANT.com. Just use the code SINISTER at checkout. In fact, Shaye had a roommate who also had a child. And so now we're looking at 4 different children possibly being in the home unattended while these 2 are just doing a whole bunch of cocaine. And to top it off, Shaye had this really weird kink. She set up CCTV cameras all over the house. Not baby cameras, not children cameras, not a Ring front door camera. No, she had multiple cameras in the bedroom, in the living room, in the kitchen. And why is this? Because she and Frankie liked to have weird sex all over the house, and they liked to role play in front of the cameras and film it. all while the children were in and out of the house. You know, Shaye did not have a safe childhood, so that was not a priority for her daughter, Frankie's daughters, or her roommate's child. They also both really enjoyed watching pornography where women were being degraded in really horrific ways. Hence why I said one of her favorite serial killers was Rose West. Shaye was the one that proposed a lot of this to Frankie. This was her idea. This had only been going on for a month, but my God, did they hit the gas on all of their debauchery. But it all boiled over in March of 2022, 1 month after they started dating, when they had their most destructive argument. See, Frankie wanted Shaye to do more cocaine with him. This is pretty normal with addicts. Like, they want you to participate in their bad behavior with them. They're like, this is fun. This is what we bonded over. And also, this makes me feel better about the bad thing I'm doing. Shaye really wasn't doing cocaine as much as she used to. Like, after she had her kids, she had stopped pretty much. And Frankie just wanted her to do more and more. And he was frustrated that she wasn't like participating in this activity with him. Which, by the way, can I just say, y'all couldn't even get 30 days out of a honeymoon phase? They couldn't even make it a month. So on this day, Frankie is trying to get Shaye to do more drugs, and they're arguing, and it's getting really intense. And during this argument, one of Shaye's ex-boyfriends texted her. Now, his name was Declan Payne. She used to live with him, but, you know, the relationship fizzled out. It wasn't even much on the timeline. But for Frankie, her ex-boyfriend was texting her, and it was already at a time that he was mad. This just set him off. It was an absolutely explosive argument between the two. I think this part says a lot about Frankie's character, because during the argument, he was all over the place and he was throwing Shaye's things out, but also telling her that she wasn't allowed to leave. She couldn't go. Like, he was afraid that she was going to go see this other guy, or he was going to lose control or something. And they're just attacking each other. As things die down, it was probably the next day or something, Shaye drops a bombshell on Frankie. She tells him, hey, by the way, I have cancer, and I actually have a medical appointment for it tomorrow for my cancer. So you should stop arguing with me. And Frankie 100% believes this. Shaye was actually going to the medical appointments. Telling Frankie that she had cancer really got her a lot of sympathy. It got her pity. It even got her money. She ended up telling her roommate, Lauren White, somebody she had known for quite a while, that she also had cancer. Now, mind you, it was later revealed this was not true. Shaye was faking going to appointments. She was lying about the cancer. The specifics didn't match up. Something else that was interesting about Lauren, Lauren was Shaye's roommate and also her closest friend. But people said that their relationship was not equal. Shaye was always telling Lauren what to do, or leaning on her emotionally, or borrowing things from her. And Lauren would give Shaye whatever she needed, because Lauren didn't really have any other friends. Like, Shaye was all she knew. And, you know, if Shaye was going to be loyal to her and give her friendship in return for Lauren, you know, letting her live at the house, and Lauren giving her some money now and then, and taking care of her and cleaning up her messes, then Lauren was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. So now Shaye starts to play her even more by saying, by the way, I have cancer and I really can't do anything. So Frankie, Lauren, please tend to me. This is also around the time that Shaye's control over Lauren, her roommate, gets even worse. It was later said in court that Shaye would get Lauren White to do her laundry for her, roll her cigarettes, match her socks for her, make her cups of tea. This was past just a friend or a roommate doing a few things or providing emotional support. They actually described her like a domestic servant in her own home. I mean, Shaye had to have a lot of control over Lauren to tell her a couple times a day, like, hey, can you roll me a cigarette? Can you roll me another cigarette? Hey, I need a cup of tea. Like, that is just wild to me. It also makes me feel terrible for Lauren, because, you know, it's so hard making friends when you're in your like late 20s or early 30s. And Lauren did not have any other friends, and she really didn't want to lose Shaye. She did not want to be alone. So for her, she would rather roll the cigarette and do whatever Shaye asks her to do, because otherwise she feels like she will be abandoned. Then in April of 2022, the problems with Shaye's ex were really escalating. Now, it's not clear if he was still in the picture or if Frankie was just really upset. Shaye even still had a connection with him, but they were mostly fighting over Shaye's ex-boyfriend. They would get into all of these arguments, and Frankie would frequently blame her ex-boyfriend, but ultimately he realized, like, you know what? I just can't make this relationship work. I have to get out. Like, this is not working for me. And this is coming from the guy that was down to do all the weird debauchery stuff and is trying to get his girlfriend to do more cocaine. Even he said Shaye Groves is too much for me. He tries to end things, and then Shaye comes back and says, I'm going to take my own life. She writes this is actually how they described it, a quote, suicidal love letter. It was a very dramatic letter about how much she loved him and how much she cared about him, and she just can't do this anymore, and her time here is up. And of course, this is going to scare Frankie, because even though he's trying to get out of the relationship, you know, he cares about her. The letter stated that she ultimately intended to commit suicide, but she didn't go through with it, and she and Frankie were back on again, off again, on again, off again for a couple of months. Shaye's friend Vicky actually said that she and Frankie during this time weren't really even dating. Like, they were sleeping together frequently, having a lot of this crazy rough sex. They weren't really hanging out like they were dating, but they were constantly going through each other's phones trying to find something. Now, at this time, Frankie was actually right. Shaye is still talking to her ex-boyfriend, but she's deleting all of the messages, she's hiding the correspondence, and she's having her ex-boyfriend come to the house and hooking up with him too, while also hooking up with Frankie. But she is so delicate about the situation that she manages to keep both of them apart. Even though Frankie was fully concerned about her ex and knew he was somewhere in the picture, Shaye is able to gaslight him out of it while she still continues a sexual relationship with Frankie, and then also continues a sexual relationship with her ex-boyfriend. So this all goes on between April and June of 2022. And Shaye's seeing this guy, going through his phone, talking smack to him, doing drugs with him, and back and forth. And then finally she comes to a conclusion. She's like, oh my God, Frankie doesn't love me. This is actually what happened. She's juggling both of these guys. And then the conclusion that she comes up with is, Frankie doesn't like me anymore. This is horrible. While she's still sleeping with this other guy, she starts believing that he wants to go back to his ex-girlfriend and also the mother of his 2 children. And Shaye furthers this claim when one day she contracts thrush. And this wasn't just, I can't believe I have to say this on Sinister, but whatever. This was not just a yeast infection. She had oral and multiple issues with thrush. To her, she believed that Frankie was sleeping with somebody else and gave this to her. Even though she's sleeping with her ex-boyfriend, might be sleeping with somebody else. We don't know what's going on in the home, but this just sent her into a spiral. Now, it's not clear if Frankie was talking to or trying to get back with, the mother of his children, but Shaye just wants all of the attention on her. She wants to have her cake and eat it too. So in June of 2022, she goes out with her roommate, Lauren, the one I told you about before, and then her other friend, Vicky, who I also mentioned. And when Shaye goes out with Lauren and Vicky, who she doesn't normally go out with all the time, Frankie immediately is like, oh my God, she's with her ex. She's out with a guy right now. And then he blocks her. That's what he does. He blocks her on his phone because he's so upset about this. I mean, they just are having this crazy back and forth. And so now Shaye gets pissed off that Frankie blocked her. And I also just want to point out, it seems like Frankie is really trying to get away from Shaye, but anytime he separates himself, she's like, no, come back here and I will use any means necessary to pull you back. She doesn't even want to have a relationship with him. She just wants him there. She just wants his attention. She just wants to control him. So Shaye gets so angry that Frankie blocks her, and she starts venting to Vicky what she's gonna do. She's making violent claims. She is saying she's going to harm him, but Vicky just kind of discounts this as like, oh, Shaye's being Shaye. It's not a big deal. The next month, in July of 2022, this already tumultuous relationship took a turn for the worst. In another instance where Shaye is going through Frankie's phone looking for evidence of him cheating, she goes through his phone while he's sleeping, and she claims to find conversations with a 13-year-old girl. When she finds this conversation, she grabs her dagger, and while Frankie is sleeping, she holds it up to his throat and wakes him up and demands answers. There was no conversation between these two. These are two crazy drug addicts that are having one of the most insane relationships that I've ever heard in my life. And they just immediately start physically fighting. And Shaye's got this dagger, and with Frankie just freshly coming out of sleep, she ends up getting the upper hand. And the second that she gets the upper hand, she slashes Frankie's throat. Then she proceeds to stab him 19 times in the heart and chest, over and over and over again. There were not even any defensive injuries on Frankie. It's probably because that when she slashed his throat, she had opened the back of his throat internally. The jugular vein was completely severed, and another artery was partially severed. The autopsy said that this caused torrential bleeding and rapid loss of consciousness. So the first strike that she made on his throat went through the back of his neck, and he almost immediately lost consciousness and could not fight back while she was stabbing him to death in the chest. After she commits this act, she immediately calls Vicky, the person she was ranting to about Frankie the night earlier. And she starts to build an alibi with Vicky. She says, "Oh my God, he attacked me." And Vicky hates Frankie. So Vicky's believing this. She said that she was a victim of sexual violence, that he tried to overpower her. And she even actually sent Vicky 3 CCTV videos, like from her camera, for proof. She said that, they argued and the relationship was over and he stormed out. Like, it was horrible. It was terrible. But one thing was a little weird about this. Shaye is building this alibi and she's saying that this horrible thing happened to her. But Vicky notes she's giggling on the phone, and she said that she was speaking as though they were having a pretty normal conversation. And Shaye got confident enough to show Vicky the body. I remember a couple of years ago, I was watching a crime show and a detective said something that I've always thought was interesting. He said that after a murder, people will often do something very bizarre because they've crossed the threshold over into no longer being a member of society. And when the brain goes over there, it will sometimes do something very strange. And that strange thing for Vicky was Shaye calling her and laughing and talking about Frankie, and then showing him laying wrapped in a duvet on top of a bunch of bags with an enormous gash on his throat. For Shaye, she had just committed this act, and so this was kind of normal. This was the world that she was living in. But Vicky was not in that world. So when she saw that, she was horrified. No amount of hating Frankie was going to change her seeing a man laying on the ground with his throat slashed in such a violent way. So Vicky immediately calls the police. When the officers were at the house, Shaye explicitly said that Frankie was an abuser and he was raping and beating her, and she had the footage to prove it. Now, mind you, when she was sending clips to Vicky, she was kind of cutting things up, but when the police are involved, they're going to want to see the entirety of the footage. The cops get weird vibes from all of this, and not to mention Frankie's dead, so of course they take her into custody to get her version of events. Shaye said that she and Frankie were drinking and had a little cocaine that night. He was gambling online, and then she was kind of texting her ex. She claims that Frankie realized that she and her ex were messaging each other, and he got a hold of her ex-boyfriend Payne and said, "Stop reaching out to Shaye. She's mine." And later that night, a fight happened, which Shaye claimed was off camera. And then when he was out of the room, she went on his phone and said that she found messages from a 13-year-old girl. Now, this is pretty important because the police start to realize a bunch of Shaye's lies right here, and it just destroys her credibility. So the first piece of information is that it is true. The girl was underage, but she was 17 years old, and Frankie had blocked her immediately once he found out her age. Then the investigation continued, and the police realized that Shaye was a willing participant in this sexual activity. She enjoyed non-consensual fantasies, but then tried to use the footage to claim that these acts were non-consensual and her murder was justified. Shaye is charged with murder, and she doesn't enter a plea, but a flurry of information comes out. This is the time in court where it was disclosed just how brutal the murder was. Once again, the knife went through the back of his throat. Shaye had actually taken measures to cover her tracks by trying to clean the crime scene. She halfway tried to clean it with bleach to clean the wall and the floor, and then she kind of just stopped. Maybe she was going to do it later. Maybe the cocaine ran out. I'm not really sure. But she tried to cover up the crime scene, which that is a huge detail in cases. If somebody makes an effort to try to get away with it in some way, I mean, it just adds so much more to the case. They also brought in Vicky and other witnesses to say that Shaye had these fetishes and tried to manipulate the police to justify her murder. And then, in another shocking detail, Shaye had actually messaged another guy and deleted this message where she invited him over to spend time with her, even though Frankie's dead body was in the house. This is all very fetishy to me. These are some dark ass, weird, there's something tied to a lot of sexuality here. It seems to me as though something really dark and fucked up happened to Shaye when she was a kid, and she brought it into her adult life, because this is all really extreme. So Shaye's defense team argues what they can, and they say that there was a lack of premeditation in Shaye's motives, and also that the relationship was abusive and Shaye was the victim. Anybody that spoke to any of their friends or family, or anybody that watched the CCTV footage of them doing drugs, where are the children? Oh my God, they're having sex again. Oh my God, they're hitting each other. Oh my God, they're doing non-consensual things, but then here's the safe word, and this is a fucking mess. Nobody, there is nobody that would watch the footage of Shaye recording herself and say that she was 100% the victim here. Like, there's nobody. Of course, February 21st, 2023, just 1 year after Shaye Groves met Frankie, she was found guilty of murder. The judge actually said the next day that it was a senseless murder and a crime of passion. He said, quote, "You lost your temper and acted on impulse. If you couldn't have Frankie, no one could. You loved the man you killed, and you killed the man you loved. You are not a cold-blooded murderer. A crime of passion is not committed in cold blood." He sentenced her to life imprisonment, but that means the minimum term is still 23 years. After the sentencing, the judge also went on to say, quote, "You have not only taken his life, but you have blighted those of the mother, father, siblings, and children for decades to come. Until last week, you showed little concern for their suffering, present, and future. Your interest was in yourself, not others." And Shaye had nothing to say. I think the judge's ruling here is really interesting because he really boils it down to a crime of passion, as though Shaye Groves didn't really have the capacity to kill unless she was emotionally charged. And I don't think that that's true. I think that based on her interest and admiration of serial killers, her love of dark things, the alcohol, the drugs, infatuation with crime and murder, I think she wanted to be a killer. And I think she actually would have wanted to be a serial killer if she got away with this. She found power in having control over others, and it was the only thing that made her feel safe. It seems to me like her childhood created a monster that she just couldn't seem to shake. So instead, she embraced it and she became the monster herself.